Well, welcome all to the Data Products webinar, the AI Infrastructure Imperative. I want to thank all of you for joining. We're excited to dive into this topic. At the podium today, we have Dr. Mechie Nkengla and Dr. Priya Sarathy. He's a little into our presenters. Dr. Mechie Nkengla is the CEO and Chief AI and Data Strategist at Data Products, a nationally recognized authority on enterprise AI. Holding a PhD in mathematics, she helps Fortune 500 leaders turn advanced AI into measurable business outcomes fast, safely, and responsibly. She also leads Nucente's AI data digital literacy initiatives, equipping individuals, teams, and government agencies with practical, real-world capability and confidence. A sought-after keynote speaker and panelist, Dr. Nkengla regularly addresses national audiences on responsible AI, data-driven decision-making, and enterprise AI strategy, bridging technical rigor with executive level impact. And co-presenting with her is Dr. Priya Sarathy, who is a certified data management professional and AI governance professional. She's an AI and analytics leader who helps organizations unlock the power of AI and data to drive innovation, productivity, and strategic growth. With extensive experience leading corporate teams and advising startups, she specializes in building high-performing, data-driven cultures with enable leaders to make smarter decisions. Her work spans AI strategy development, executive coaching, organizational transformation, guiding leadership teams through the complexities of adopting AI responsibly and effectively. Through her book, Executive Workshops and Special Speaking Engagements, Dr. Sarathy translates cutting edge insights into practical, actionable frameworks that help decision makers thrive in an AI driven world. At the core of her mission is accelerating AI fluency across professionals. Currently, she is leading the Center for Data Sciences and Analytics at Kennesaw State University, focused on strengthening industry collaboration to build the future AI savvy workforce. Thank you both for joining us today. So, to kick off the conversation, yes, let's begin with Priya. Hi, Priya.
Good. Um, Hello, everybody. Glad to be here talking to Mechie about this wonderful topic, the AI infrastructure imperative. We just wanted to kind of give a background for our talk. We always have talked about AI as being part of the requiring data, technology, process, and then the keyword culture and people has become important. But I would kind of replace process and put algorithms instead because it's about AI algorithms. And it's amazing that the AI algorithm also requires infrastructure. And that is something we need to think about carefully because it's not infrastructure as we know it. When we build a house, we lay down all the framing, which is how we build houses traditionally. And then we also make sure the blueprint of putting the plumbing, the wiring, and the HVAC, right? Now you have to think about that much more in advance. With AI, we have to be responsible. We need to think about it being flexible to what we will do with it because we don't know exactly what we're going to do with it today, but we plan to do something with it tomorrow. So planning ahead means before the drywall goes up, before the insulation goes up, you need to be thinking about infrastructure that will support a more flexible, agile, and most important, enterprise AI. That is the true source of value for a company is to use AI in enterprise scale. So that's where my thought is why I think AI infrastructure is something we need to start focusing on today. What do you
Yeah,
think?
you're absolutely right. Great way to sort of frame the conversation. It's quite clear, right? You're having conversations with clients and prospects now, especially at the board level. The conversation has shifted. Now, AI is a power and cooling conversation, not just an IT conversation. And this happens for a host of reasons that we're going to get into a few during this conversation today, right? We think that AI infrastructure decisions are increasingly constrained by the power delivery, the heat rejection, the grid timelines, not just server lead times, right? We're using the infrastructure as an anchor stack to frame the urgency, right? The data centers, for example, consume about 400 terawatt hours, right? And this is statistics from 2024 that translates to about 1.5% of the global electricity. And there's a projection that by 2030, right, it will more than double. And this is the global electricity. Keep in mind that the global south really does not have any leverage. So all the electricity consumed in the global south, with Africa, with the largest growing population that really doesn't have large data centers, is all superimposed by the grid centers in the west. That's a huge indicator of cost and importance that we have to think about, right? So what are our energy? How is the cooling conversation coming about?
Absolutely. Um, so I think where we are headed next is part of that responsible AI, whether the how we compute is one thing, but how that data is being used is also something very important. So my sense about the computing is it's only going to increase. From an AI use case point of view, if we initially used AI or analytics, advanced analytics in marketing and pricing, but now we are using it across the enterprise for product monitoring, product creation, product operations, every part of it, you embed that. I can only imagine how much the consumption is going to be there. And I think that reflects upon the race to build data centers that's happening all over, United States right now. It's the data centers are your single source of tremendous consumption, energy consumption, water consumption for cooling as well. So,
Spot on. Like, there is a statistics, and don't quote me on it, then I read it a few months ago, and I'm a ballparking here. About 90% of the space available in data centers is filled up currently. So
mhm.
there's this big push for the last 5 years to ramp up. We need more space, right? And this is just before generative AI became the world newest global phenomenon. And so the space that was and the computing power that was going to be required for that will significantly increase. And so with the dwindling space available at global data centers, the need and the rise of use of AI, there was this constraint on data centers. So about 5, 10 years ago, there was, no, actually around 7 years, I would say, there was this push. Everyone was building data centers everywhere, right? Because there's prospect and data centers were being gobbled up while they're still in construction. Companies were buying them out and leasing them for 20, 30 years while they're still in the groundbreaking phase of things. But the shift has happened now, right?
Mhm.
Not everyone's realizing, or larger organizations and enterprises are realizing they don't need to own a data center. The cloud versus the on-prem, especially when it comes to AI workloads. They're talking in terms of workload appetites as opposed to ideology, we own this, right? And this is driven, I think, by three main principles, right? Priya, like you mentioned, the training and frontier fine tuning in terms of the usage, right? The best fit. We're talking about inference at scale, hybrid by default. So you don't just want to have on-prem, you want to have some that's on the cloud, some that you own. And then the third critical one, which goes into the ethics based on the sensitivity of the data and the regulated environments that the organization is working with, right? The decision factor is often to control the flows of the data and the auditability of it, like you mentioned, Priya, not just the physical locations of the GPUs.
So from the point of the imperative, where do you think we should be going? From my point of view, you talked about the hybrid architecture. I think there needs to also be a mindset shift to think about it as what do you mean by hybrid? What do you mean by assigning the responsibility of designing that architecture? Should it really come from bottoms up, or should it come from the decisions you're going to take? So it's the planning ahead that I'm kind of focused on. Meshi is like, do we think or can we think ahead of the curve of things that we don't know and expect. So is that AI infrastructure once built much more difficult to change? And that is my concern is we need to spend the time now and look at beyond what we have today, because today I believe most companies are experimenting still. They are still testing out. They are really not scaling as such. And that scaling infrastructure is quite distinctively different than starting off with a prototype or one department, one business line of business at a time. So from that point of view, I believe that just saying I will move from a line of business or a product line to a scale enterprise wide, there's so many intermediate steps one has to think about and work through. And all of this, I believe, starts off, I think it's becoming a big challenge now. It starts off not just with the fact that infrastructure is going to be expensive. Nvidia stock had gone up 75% yesterday. That's the announcement. The market isn't reacting. But how much of chips do we need to accumulate? How much of data storage space do we need to have? Google and Amazon are fighting and bidding for acquiring the capacity today in anticipation of the utilization tomorrow. In the same way, what is it about companies that have to think about what are we going to buy? What technologies do we want to buy and bring in-house? The on-prem versus cloud is a serious issue that we have to revisit again now with this hybrid architecture. Or do we want to borrow it and kind of become susceptible to the increasing cost of data storage that's skyrocketing?
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
that's quite a deep sort of breakdown there, Priya. And I think, like a good consultant, I'm going to answer with it depends, right? It depends on quite a few different factors. Um, the first one is what risk scares you the most right now? Just ask that question. Is it vendor concentration? Is it you're building a strategy that's stranded based on on-prem capacity? Is it AI nationalism constraints, because there are geopolitical factors as well in play that we need to think about, especially as senior leaders, right? All these are things that we need to consider. But the key thing in terms of when you're crafting this out is you're building, like you build software, you build a very modular, a very flexible software because the situation is unfolding and will continue to unfold.
Yeah.
Right? I think we had a conversation the other day, Priya, where this mimics the fight within when I think it's in the 90s, late 90s, with the Blu-ray disc versus the other one, right? Case in point, Blu-ray disc one, I won the fight. And so we have this competitive edge between which LLM is going to sort of take the market or which set of LLMs are going to take the market. And you have different organizations having different strategic responses to it, right? You have Meta. Meta is employing a open source, so let people use this, so it becomes ingrained. You have IBM. IBM is saying, we are the aggregator, we are the cloud go-to, we are agnostics. We can supply you with Claude, with OpenAI, with Llama, with our own Granite, and you pick and choose, and we'll just manage it for you. We're going to act as that managed service provider for all your generative AI needs. We have Microsoft doing on the investment side. I'm going to invest in this and invest in that so that whichever one wins, we have a stake in this. Apple is taking a different route. Apple is saying, we're going to let the AI people do their things, and we're just going to be a facilitator in terms of driving and stay within our space and not compete directly head to head. So we all recognize, or rather the large organizations and hyperscalers recognize the opportunity, the impact to sort of drive the market for the next decades, several decades. And so it's about what right position will play out. But back to your original question, and not to digress more clearly in terms of how do you go about setting up this modular framework? And now dare say 90% of all organizations have played or dangled with AI in some fashion, whether you have the folks that are just grabbing up OpenAI licenses or Copilot licenses as part of this is how we're going to use AI. And you have other people that are fully building Llama on-prem gated workspaces to sort of mark out their data and their privacy, and to others that are doing the combination, the hybrids of the other ones. But in terms of that infrastructure, again, you're thinking about this, what is my industry, right? What are the regulations? How regulated is the space? That's a key factor. How strong is my IP? How that will enable what vendors I want to use, the cost going up. There are quite a few things that you need to consider. So I would not say it's a one size fits all, but I think you start from the risk, the critical risks that you're exposed to, build a starting point, play out, understanding that this is a living playbook and it's absolutely going to change.
And I couldn't agree more with you on that because I think when I suggested that there are options of how you start your investments, what I also wanted to kind of emphasize is this investment comes with a lot of players to choose from, you know. And yes, you have the hyperscalers, they are there, but there are three other layers around it. I mean, you can start with the three technologies, the Microsoft, the Googles, the Amazon, but then you have the layer of the NVIDIA chips because they are going to entering it. You have, uh, Meta coming in and X that are kind of in that layer. And then with all this built on top of it, you have the perplexities of the world, the anthropics of the world. And so it is that is now an infrastructure decision because what you bring in to the points that you made is a decision that one has to make is however you want to go, which is the one that you may think is the least risky, the most value added for what you're going to do? Or is it something you invest in, some inside, some with a partner, and work your way through it by testing it? Because I think there's a lot of risk that's involved. I'll give you an example. When I was in AT&T, it was a time when fiber optics became big. It was a question about creating that long miles and miles of fiber optic to be laid in the ocean to connect international calling before AT&T was broken up. And that one investment really had an impact on what went on to happen to AT&T. The cost was incredible, the maintenance. It was not a sustainable cost. And I think that is the repetition of the same thought process is you have value on one hand that you have to consider, but on the other hand, the cost of getting that infrastructure down is something that you don't know right now. You know, somebody is going to have to pay for lunch, right? It's not a free lunch anywhere, even with technology. So I think that adoption may be in bits and pieces, but to me, if you have the blueprint set up to give you that flexibility, then yes, you can have the luxury of working through the prototype, working through the smaller, internally manageable risk before you go full-fledged to connect with the customer. I mean, I think there are a lot of statistics on this because companies are all wanting to adopt AI. So they have built AI compute infrastructure. 96% of the companies, I believe, is one of the numbers I saw.
Yeah.
But people
No,
are still upset about how to schedule, or they don't know how to schedule the computing allocation. So that's going to be a big problem of infrastructure.
oh, spot on. And frankly, performance per watt is a board level KPI now, and it's being discussed all over the boards everywhere, like performance per wattage. And that underscores the point you make around the energy costs,
Yeah.
right? Which is something that's not really openly discussed when we talk about AI utilization value versus cost. The energy cost is a really, really big driver. So yes, you can make AI cheaper by optimizing the models, but the energies remains like a first order cost driver and a scaling constraint, right? Reuters, I read an article where Reuters reports that the scale of planned hyperscaler investments and emergence of very large gigawatt class facilities in planning discussions has really skyrocketed, right, exponentially.
Yeah.
And beyond the hyperscalers, let's move into the investment community. Let's look at what all the big funds and PE firms, fund managers are investing in. There's been shift from the software, from the algorithms into the infrastructure. This should highlight to anyone really that that's where the underlying value is, right? Right
So
now,
I
there's still some fluctuation happening in terms of the software, but the actual infrastructure, that's where all the movement in terms of fund managers and investment money, that's where it's going into.
I think I saw in the Wall Street Journal a statement about the capital allocation by the hyperscalers, and that was in the range of $75 billion for computing and data centers, mostly on data centers, but
Yes.
that is immense allocation and outlay. So it just shows that even though I don't know what my firm is doing, if I want to be with the trend, you know, so you want to be the leaders with the leaders or the followers of leaders, then they are anticipating the demand to come from each one of the organizations because of that. So,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's definitely a telling sign.
Yeah. Frankly, your AI strategy is only as fast, right, as the interconnection agreement, which is again
Yeah.
the infrastructure. And a good point to also bring up is the fact that hyperscalers are gaining ground, but we expect them to get ground, right? Because they have speed, efficiency, and the supply chain leverage that most other organizations do not have.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I'll be remiss of me not to kind of think or talk about is the people and the culture. So I am going to bring that in because at the end of the day, the AI infrastructure that you build has to be people friendly, has to be customer friendly, has to be user friendly.
Mhm.
So to me, part of that infrastructure decision has to be important because I think AI governance is going to be all over the place in 26 and 27, at least for the starting point, because you invested a significant amount in your outlays, in your compute power, energy sources, whatever it is within an organization. Forget the hyperscalers are investing more, but you need folks to manage and use them in the most effective manner. And it's that people skills that are going to have to come into play, the culture of trying to understand this infrastructure and what its capabilities are and to use it. Because I remember you and I talked about it before, is the value proposition, right?
Right.
And that is going to be not just selling a product, it is designing the innovation and building that innovation into the product so it's appealing for customers to use. You want to make sure that customer support is seamless. That means training your customers. Yes, you may replace your customer with, support centers with a lot of agents to interact, but it's still the customers. You don't have bots on the other end. So I
No,
think
no,
that is where I think one should also invest in as a part of the AI infrastructure is a people investment and that in
oh,
different
absolutely.
forms.
Oh, spot on, right? We have people, processes, and technology, right? Underscored by data, right? So that's absolute key part of that three-legged stool. But to underscore your point, and I want to rephrase it in a way that resonates with me, I hope resonates with other people in the call here. Utilization is everything, right? Underutilized GPUs are one of the most expensive assets in modern IT frameworks, and they're not sort of measured at all, right? So you want to think in terms of your financial operations, your FinOps, right? What are the joined up metrics across what's the model demand, the schedule behavior, the power, the cooling, all of that you want a dashboard, and that use costs in terms of your overall cost and your utilization. Really, really critical. I know we are almost out of time, and I want
Yeah.
to give
Yes.
chance for at least one question from the audience.
Yeah.
Nancy, do you have any questions for us?
Yes, actually. Thank you. Priya, Mechie, I know this was going to be a great conversation. So, but yes, we do have a question here. And if there's any others, please put them into the chat. Exactly what you were just talking about, Mechie. The question is, are we optimizing the wrong metric, GPU availability, when the real bottleneck is power, cooling, sustained throughput, and how should that change? build versus buy decisions?
Priya, I'll let you take a first go at that one before I give my 2 cents.
Um, I think the metrics has to be twofold. One, yes, the metrics that you talk about are more cost effectiveness, operational metrics that we have to think about, but there is the outcome metrics that also have to be taken. And that's where I think adoption metrics is very important because without the adoption by your customers of your products, you still are nowhere in your vision statement. You haven't accomplished it. So when it comes to infrastructure, it's not about did I get value, is what kind of value did I get from it? And I think that is going to be unique proposition for every organization to think about because oftentimes right now we have focused last 2 years focused on internal productivity and that has been great, but with the infrastructure put in place, what are the levels, the numbers of innovative outcomes that we can create, new products, new services, process improvements? So those all are also going to be metrics that we have to use. Cost, energy, and computers on one end, and that's going to be evolving. That we do not have too much control as technology evolves. We just need to be following the most effective and most efficient. So I think there's twofold outside in. What is it that is being delivered through the AI infrastructure? You need to put a line item against it. And without that metric, the cost metric becomes pointless. I mean, it's not pointless, but it's something that you will hit your head against the wall with, and you'll be unable to respond to your investor community.
Quite right. I would respond with I have a framework, a cheat sheet framework, and I should start by saying this framework stays within the environment of the infrastructure only. So if we're looking at infrastructure, there's a 5-part scorecard, if you will, framework. The first one is your elasticity needs. Do you want steady versus spiky demands? How do you use it? That should keep in mind, right? What about your data gravity, right? Where does your data live? How does it move? That should determine how you go about setting up your infrastructure, what's important to you in terms of those metrics. What about latency and availability? Are you looking something that's global versus local, right? Failover requirements, redundancy in terms of setting up the infrastructure. That's another factor you think about when you're setting things up. What about the power and cooling feasibility? We talked about the energy being very important. What's the capacity of the site? Is it something that you can retrofit or grid timelines and availabilities? And most importantly, governance and risk, right? The auditability, isolation for whatever regulation or reasons, and the vendor concentration that you want to focus on, right? I think all in all, there are different ways you can choose to measure, but that's a good solid step in terms of thinking about building your infrastructure. And this matters when you're just starting out versus where you already have something in place and want to add added flexibility so that you can change and be very modular and flexible for the future, right? But regardless of which framework or scorecard you use, whether it's in actually measuring cost, impact, or setting the stage for your continued development for your AI strategy, there's one thing I want everyone to take away with. My one giveaway would be AI infrastructures are not a one-time procurement, right? It's something that's going to be continuous and needs to be optimized. Think of it like a portfolio that you need to optimize across cloud, co-location, and some on-prem as well on a continuous living basis. That would be my one takeaway. Priya, what would be your one takeaway for the audience?
I think that AI is getting more powerful and it's evolving. We are just on an early stage, and it's going to reach its most potential only based on the infrastructure we provided. So we have to think smart about what we invest in, how we invest in, and we really need to take the long-term view and a more holistic view. As you pointed out, risk compliance, that framework, we need to be able to think holistically about all that infrastructure is building and creating and enabling. So that is my one takeaway is we really need to build that foundation carefully, thoughtfully, and in a smart and savvy way.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's quite a great takeaway.
Yes, it certainly is. Thank you, Mechie and Priya, for your insights and takeaways. What a great conversation. And I want to take this opportunity to invite all to our next webinar in our series, Breaking Through Technical Debt and Fragmented Architectures. Stay tuned for the joint details. Thank you again for our wonderful presenters. And I certainly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you again for joining, and we'll see you at the next one. Bye all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.